I think that we want to talk about pub culture because we also miss community itself.
Yeah.
I think pubs are like the most obvious place where people of all backgrounds come together in one space and easily talk to each other. Just small talk. It doesn't have to be full conversations with a complete stranger, but people are nice to each other. They say excuse me at the bar. They, you say hello to someone you've not seen in a while. Your neighbour's sat on the next table and you give them a little nod. It's these remnants of community that we just don't really get anywhere else in society today, I think.
Hello and welcome to Book Club with the Italian Wine Podcast. I'm your host, Richard Hough, and I'm delighted that you're joining us as we get between the vines with some of the best wine writing out there. So sit back, pour yourself a glass, and enjoy the show with the Italian Wine Podcast.
This month our guest is Katie Mather, an award-winning beer and wine writer, pub culture aficionado, and self-confessed natural wine bore. Katie is also the deputy editor of Pellicle magazine, an award-winning online magazine and podcast focused on beer, wine, cider, food and drink culture, with a strong emphasis on independent voices and high-quality storytelling. Good morning, Katie, and welcome to the show. How are you?
Hello, thank you so much for inviting me on. I'm really good, thanks. Yeah, just now that February's here and January's over, I'm just really happy to just crack on.
Good, it's a pleasure to have you on the show, and there's a lot of interesting issues and areas that I want to ask you about. First of all, you are a trained and qualified journalist, but what first got you into beer and wine writing as an area of specialism?
So I was working for the dark side. I was working in marketing. So I graduated from university. I was a journalist for a short while and I went into marketing. I missed writing a lot, especially creative writing and the more sort of creative aspects of investigative journalism. While I was working, I set up a blog and I was thinking, what am I interested in? What could I come up with a lot of topics on that I can really delve into? And that was beer, because I was getting interested in beer. And so it kind of just blossomed from having a blog, which at the time was called the Snap and the Hiss, when you crack a can open.
Yes, I know that sound.
So it was all about sort of my personal connections with certain breweries and pubs. It was about the stories around beer, more than the beer itself, because there was a lot of people in sort of 2016 to 2019 doing straight up beer reviews. And I wasn't particularly interested in adding to that. I wanted to create more more stories about what beer really means to people and how pubs are a part of our lives and stuff like that. And so it really spanned from there.
Yeah, very, very interesting. And as a passionate beer drinker myself, it's something that I really empathise with, this kind of culture, if you like, that lies behind beer, because it took me a long while to realise that there's more to beer than just drinking it and getting drunk. There is a important culture in the way it brings people together, but then also the stories behind the individual breweries.
That's it. And I was super interested to learn more about it at the time as well. So, a beer nerd isn't born, we are created. And it's sort of, when I was younger, I used to drink a Foster's Top, God help me. And these things, you don't know until you start learning. And I realised, I prefer these tropical flavours. Maybe I'll try this sort of beer. And then eventually that got me interested in wine, because there is so much more in wine that you can learn about. It's almost like you can never learn all of it in your whole lifetime. Yeah. And that is appealing to me. I know it can seem daunting to some people, but, I just want to try and gorge myself on all that information.
Yeah, absolutely. So, your main area of interest is beer, or would you say, how would you split your time between beer and wine in terms of your writing?
Well, at the moment, I'd probably say it's 50-50 because I write obviously I'm the deputy editor of Pellicle, as you say. I'm also wine lead for Pellicle. So I write about beer and wine for Pellicle, but all the wine articles come to me and I commission them and edit them. Because I'm quite interested in kind of seeing our direction of where wine's going, and the stories that we tell. But then also I write monthly columns for Glug magazine, which is Wine 52's magazine. And I also write really regularly for Ferment, which is Beer 52's magazine. So, yeah, I think at the moment I'm writing just as much about wine as I am about beer, which is great for me. I really am interested in both.
Excellent.
So,
And before I come back to Pellicle, what are the challenges and opportunities of being a freelance beer and wine writer? I understand you had a slightly challenging moment this morning.
It's, you know, it's full of, like you say, it's full of challenges, but it's also full of really great opportunities. And I know that it sounds like a real cop-out. It sounds really LinkedIn of me to say that. But I really enjoy working for myself. I left full-time employment in 2018 and I haven't had like formal full-time employment since. I've been a freelancer ever since, working sometimes in hospitality businesses. I did own a bar for 3 years during COVID, which was a terrible time to open a bar. If I could go back, I would say don't do it. But, you know, in the end, when I look back, you know, to be able to be recommending beer and wine to people in my own space, that was fantastic. Creating this little community, that was also amazing. But yeah, the challenges come about because you're making your own work. So if you don't have any work in, that's your own fault. You have to pitch, you have to keep talking to people. And some weeks you might be poorly, you might have a cold, you might be on holiday, but you still need to keep one eye on your emails. So I suppose that's the difficult part of it, is never really switching off.
Sorry, go on.
But the good parts for me outweigh the negatives, for sure.
And is hospitality something that you would consider going back into in tandem, perhaps, with your career as a wine writer, or have you been there and done that?
Well, no, I do. I pop back into hospitality all the time. I've written a few pieces in the past about hospitality being our secret safety net, where it's where a lot of people go for employment when they really need, you know, some extra cash. And we talk about things like these days it's polygamous working, which I hate as a term because really we should be looking at giving people proper wages rather than expecting them to work more than one job. However, I have enjoyed going back to hospitality because I do miss the hustle and bustle of a pub, and I do miss getting to know the locals. And so recently I covered at my local pub, the Swan with two necks, repeated winner of Camera Awards, I will say, for someone on maternity, because I miss being behind a bar, quite honestly. So yeah, it's not an easy job by any means, but I love the experience, and going back always shows me how much I've lost, you know, like how I actually need to get back into it. I need to get faster. I need to be better at this. You know, it's like I got lazy sitting behind a desk.
And I guess it gives you that kind of access to what's happening on the ground, if you like, as a wine writer. I guess we can sometimes, or a beer writer, you can sometimes find yourself spending endless hours in your room in front of a computer. But I guess being involved in hospitality as well just gives you access to what's happening on the ground.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, it sounds a little bit, I don't know, cynical to say that I would go back to hospitality just for the stories, but it really does help remind me what I love about the industry, and also really shows me stuff that I would not have learned from books or chatting to my industry pals. So, you know, you're not going to get the honest opinions of a person in the pub if you just go in there with a microphone and say, what do you think about this? You know, it's sitting there, it's talking to people, and then things come up. Like working at this local pub I mentioned, it's an old pub and a proper country inn. The growth of 0% beers in that pub is pretty surprising. And that is something that I learned in particular, is that people are taking on trends when they don't realise it's a trend, you know?
Yeah.
It's not all about who's drinking what and why. It's about people actually taking what's available to them because it suddenly has become available to them. They don't have to have a lime and soda anymore. They can have a Guinness Zero. And that was quite eye-opening to me because I kind of assumed that a pub like that, people would be like, oh, if you're not drinking proper beer, then you have a water. Because that used to be the opinion when I worked back in sort of 2010, you know?
Yeah.
Things change,
yeah.
and if you don't keep up with it, you're not going to know that.
Yeah, that's very interesting, and the whole discussion around no-low beers and now wines, increasingly wines, is one that's very interesting, and again, it's something that we can come back to. But as I mentioned to you before we started the recording, I've been struck recently by the vibrancy of beer writing. Maybe it's just because it's something that I've started to notice, and it's been happening, forever. But for me, it just seems to be a particularly fun, evocative, and kind of dynamic landscape, really, the beer writing landscape. And sometimes I think wine can seem a bit more self-interested and elitist and refined. Is that a fair observation, or am I just naturally predisposed to the world of beer?
I'm sat here smiling because I completely agree with you, and it's nice to hear that from someone else because I feel like I'm not making it up.
Yeah.
I am also really pleased to hear that you think that beer writing is going through a particularly vibrant time, because I agree. You only had to see the Guild of Beer Writer Awards last year to see just how much amazing writing's coming out. And it's not just about, beer and how it tastes and how it makes you feel. It's about community. There's the politics of food and drink involved. There's, our pubs that are worth saving. There's all kinds of things that are enmeshed with this topic that people are now bringing out in their journalism. And I just love it. I don't ever get bored. When I get sent pictures to Pellicle, or Matthew or Claire or Lily share them, and because that's the team at Pellicle. It's never dull, someone always has something new to say. And you'd think after hundreds of years, there wasn't much to say about beer anymore, but it just couldn't be further from the truth. So yeah, I think you're right there. And I'm glad that you said that. But also with wine writing, I think there is sort of an elitism. There's a sort of kind of, and this isn't throughout wine writing, I will say, there's some wine writing I really enjoy, and it can be the same, it can be, especially in like Substack newsletters and things like that, where people are really emotionally tied to certain, places, and the wine is evocative of an area. And this is the sort of thing that I'm really interested in. But there are people there are sort of types of writing about wine where they're clinging to this idea of it being above food and beer, and it's this extra, so almost extraterrestrial thing that normal people couldn't understand.
Yes, absolutely. And going back to the beer, does this increased vibrancy of beer writing, if we're agreed that is the case, does that reflect in an increased diversity in the beer sector more generally? There's a greater choice of beers available now. There's the emergence of craft beers, there's the no-low beers, there's local breweries popping up all over the place. I remember, growing up in Glasgow when I was, in my late teens, the choice was either a heavy or a lager. So there wasn't really much to write about, I don't suppose, whereas now I guess that scene is perhaps a bit more diverse as well.
I think, that's a really good question. And I think the diversity of beer and where it's made and how we can feel connected, say, to a local brewery more than we can a national or an international, certainly has sway on how we write about those things. So some of our most popular stories, and the stories that I love the most at Pellicle, are when someone does a deep dive into one of their favourite pubs. Because I think that really just shows the sort of, it's the quality of the beer that makes a great pub, but it's also, the people, how the atmosphere feels, why do you like this pub? Did you used to go to it with your parents? Was it the first place you ever had a pint? Did you go there much later in life and realise, actually, this is sort of something that's been missing from my life? It's these sorts of personal connections to beer probably couldn't have come about without this kind of interesting diversity in beer. But then again, saying that, people are also really passionate about historic breweries and traditional styles. So cask beer is always a popular topic. And breweries like Harvey's, for example, people love them, and quite rightly so. They're still making great beer, hundreds of years after they were, built. So, like, I wrote about Theakston's brewery last year because Old Peculiar happens to be one of my favourite beers of all time. And that's not a modern style, is it? And people still tell me that they really like that piece. And I think what's interesting about writing about that from a modern perspective, which is what I tried to do, try and add that freshness to something that you see all the time, is that you do see it all the time. It becomes part of the furniture and you don't ever think, what is that on the label? What does it actually taste like? How is it made? All the history of the brewery and who made it. So being able to tell that story and people going, oh, I never thought about asking that question. I didn't think it would be that much of an interesting beer. It was really satisfying to do. A bit investigative. Yeah. It was quite fun.
For our international audience, Theakston's and Old Peculiar are kind of classic quintessential English cask ales. That's...
Yeah. It's brewed in North Yorkshire in a place called Masham. And it's quite unlike anything else. It looks as dark as a stout or a mild, but it's quite fruity and it's bitter and I think they would call it like a dark ale or a ruby ale. But it's very, very dark. If you hold it up to a light, it's like this lovely sort of ruby colour, but in the pint glass it just looks black.
Sounds delicious.
It's gorgeous.
You've mentioned a couple of articles there that you've been involved in at Pellico. This article about the Old Peculiar, and then you also mentioned those articles, those deep dives into people's favourite pubs, and I've read a few of them as well, and they really are excellent. Not forgetting some of the photography and the images associated with them are really brilliant and well done as well. But just to take a step back, what is Pellico then? What does it mean for a start?
So a pellicle itself is kind of like a symbiosis. So, if you're making kombucha and you have that jelly on the top, it just grows through. It's like yeast and bacteria, proteins all mixing together. It shows that something is alive and a change is taking place within. So it can happen on foods and drinks, but basically it's like a really essential part of some fermentations. And we like to think that we're kind of using ideas to do the same.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
That makes sense, I think. So, what about the magazine itself then? This is an online magazine, but also I think available in hard copy as well?
So yes, it's an online magazine, pelliclemag.com. But we are aiming to have a print version out this year. And we've also I published a zine last year called A Place to Be via Pellicle as well. So that was about drinking in liminal spaces. Again, harking back to my interest in the surroundings where you're drinking rather than the drink itself.
Okay. And what's the balance in Pellico between beer, wine and other beverages, for example?
At the moment, the balance is very swayed in beer's favour. However, we do have wine. So I think it's probably like 60-40.
Mm-hmm.
But then the 40 is wine. But then the 40 also has bit like on cider, occasionally on coffee. So
yeah,
although I tell a lie there. So I think it's probably like 60% beer, and then the rest is made up between like food, wine, cider, coffee, and other topics, that don't really fit it. So we've had a couple of whiskey pieces that did really well as well.
Okay. One I read last week was on Edinburgh's communal apple spirit, which was a really amazing story. I really loved that story. I need to get my hands next time I'm in Edinburgh on a bottle of their apple spirit.
Absolutely. Imran is such a great writer based in Edinburgh. I really like his blog as well. it's just really he's just knowledgeable about the area. So every time, because I go up to Edinburgh fairly often, so I've got friends there and family there, but like his kind of views on the pubs there and everything, it's really refreshing because it can be quite a hipstery place now in places. So yeah, it's really great to see his opinions on stuff. And as a Scotsman, how would you pronounce it? So it's Pochle. I've been saying Pockle.
Pockle, yeah.
Pockle. Yeah. Okay. I'm not far off. So that's the apple spirit, foraged and collected from gardens all around Edinburgh and made into this lovely sort of, I don't know, eau de vie? Is it eau de vie if you make it out of apples?
Yeah, I think so, yeah. So it brings together a lot of different topics, I suppose, this kind of communal spirit.
Yeah, amazing. Absolutely it does. And it really brings to mind for me an idea of Edinburgh actually still having community when everyone sees it as some sort of Disneyland.
Yeah.
Which is nice.
I mean, to go back to the topic of wine, you wrote recently, one of your recent articles in Pellicle was about the wine scene in Tenerife. So what took you to Tenerife? What did you find? What is so interesting, or what should we know about the wine scene in Tenerife?
Well, I fell in love with Canarian wine when I was in Lanzarote. I have a real love for the Canary Islands. It's strange. It's not like I used to go there on holiday when I was younger or anything, but I'm really obsessed and interested in geology and volcanoes. And obviously this has really helped me with my wine knowledge as well. So going to Lanzarote and finding wineries growing, well, the vineyards were basically just in hollows in volcanic soil where lava quite obviously had been by, was just mind-blowing to me. And the wine itself, thankfully, was absolutely amazing. So when I went to Tenerife the next year, this was for other reasons. My husband's a fell runner and he wanted to run up Mount Teide.
Okay, as you do.
Ski to summit. So I organised that as a birthday present, which doesn't sound like a nice birthday present, but he loved it. And I did research on the wine.
Okay.
While he did that,
Everyone's happy.
Yeah, I'm more sensible, I think. And I was trying wines from Tenerife, and I just loved the expression that they had. They were bright and vibrant, but they had this real depth. And the wines made on Tenerife as well just are natural wines. So you alluded to me being a natural wine bore. It's something that I'm interested in just because that's how I got into wine. I found it more accessible. But I can talk about more of that later if you want me to. But
tell me now. Yeah, tell me. I mean, natural wine. Why don't you bore us for a moment or two on natural wine? And I mean, I guess what I'm interested in is, what is the market for natural wine in the UK at the moment? Because it's a very divisive issue, or it can be natural wine. I know certain people in the wine industry who just turn their nose up at anything natural.
Well, I'd love to bore you. For me, as someone coming from the beer world, wine was very intimidating. And I obviously am not the only person in the world who have ever found wine an intimidating subject. But being so interested in it, and it being an agricultural product, which is something that I found very interesting about beer as well, is like learning how it's how the grain's harvested, how it's turned into beer. Wine was much more of a direct agricultural product, and therefore I found it infinitely more fascinating in that respect. How it grows out of the ground affects, and where it grows out of the ground affects its flavour, its texture, its aroma. That's fascinating to me. And when I went to a natural wine bar, they couldn't do enough. They were making me taste things, some things I didn't like, some things I really did. They were telling me all about it freely and totally accessibly. And I just thought, wow, this is like craft beer in a way.
Yeah.
I understand this on a level that I didn't understand going to a wine bar with like a really long menu and having to choose them myself from names that I didn't recognise. Because I only learned later on that they wouldn't have the great variety on the list. So I didn't know what I liked. It was vineyard names and I just wouldn't know that. So I ended up with just something I picked at random, which isn't something I would like to do. Whereas in this natural wine bar, they were saying, this person made this, and here they are, and this is the grape they used, and I went so far down the rabbit hole that I've been on 3 harvests.
Wow.
At different natural winemakers. So my first harvest was at Rita and Trossen. I really love German wine. Sorry to the Italian wine fan listeners.
That's okay. Hello, friends.
I also love German. I love Italian wine as well, but I love German wine. And so I went to Rudolf and Rita Trossen in the Mosel, and then I went to Staffelter and Katla wines the following time I went. And then this year, the year just passed, I went to Katla wines in Rheinhessen, where they've moved. And each time I learned so much about how to make wine and how important the grapes are, and the ground is, and the weather is, the climate is. I don't know. There's something about it being so open that I loved.
Yeah, that accessibility is very interesting, and particularly I think from the point of view that the wine industry is forever lamenting the problem attracting a new generation of wine drinkers. And I don't know whether you would consider yourself Gen Z, Katie, but it strikes me that natural wine is, from your experience, is a very good stepping stone, or a very good access point into the world of wine for younger drinkers. And also, I suppose, the experience that you have of being involved in harvesting wines. We're forever being told that Gen Z wants a more experience-based consumption habit. So actually being hands-on and involved in harvesting grapes seems like a really good way to do that.
Yeah, I think you spot on there. That's experiential marketing has been massive for Gen Z. I personally am a millennial. Thank you very much for thinking that I'm younger. But I do see how that could inspire a new generation to be interested in wine. Because
so sorry to interrupt, but from a practical point, how do you get involved in helping out at a harvest? Is there a website you can go onto, or?
I personally I'm just open to emailing people, which obviously isn't possible for everybody. And I understand there's a certain amount of not privilege, but I had met people through my job. And then used that to kind of find people who might accept me on their harvests. I wish there was a way of doing that. That sounds great, actually. When people, it's called woofing. Have you heard of that?
Yes.
Yeah. It would be great if there was a more sort of central point where people could say, I'm paying this much, but I'm also looking for apprentices or people who've never done it before, and this is where you'd sleep and stuff and sign up and you can come over. That would make it more accessible for sure. And there is a shortage of sort of enthusiastic younger people, definitely. I mean, I'm 38. I don't know how many more sort of what I would call hobby harvests I've got left in me. It's hard work.
Yeah.
And I call it a hobby because obviously I'm nowhere near skilled at it. I just like being there for the vibes.
Yeah. I think there is a website that pairs small, often organic wineries looking for seasonal workers, if they want to come and do a week or 2 weeks work. If I can dig that out, I'll put that on the show notes, maybe.
Yeah, that would be great, because I think the more people know about that's a possibility. I think that the more people would be actively interested in wine. Because for me, when I got into beer, the first thing I wanted to do was go and look at a brewery. Yeah. You want to, I don't know about everybody else. Maybe there are a lot of people who just say, it's just beer, I like to drink it on the weekend. Absolutely fine. It's just wine, I like to collect it, but I'm not really interested in where it comes from. Also, absolutely fine. But I am desperate to know absolutely everything about it. And coming back to Tenerife, I've met with a winemaker there, and he literally I turned up at his house because I couldn't find any contact details, but it did say somewhere on his social media, just pop by. And I thought, well, okay, I will. that's, the journalism in me. I just not really bothered. I'll just pop in. And turned up. He couldn't have been nicer. He just welcomed me in, showed me his like orchards of papaya trees. And because that's the thing about Tenerife as well. It's got this beautiful, almost like tropical jungle climate. It's very humid up high, because the entire island is that beautiful volcano.
Yes.
So the higher up you go up its slopes, the more the cloud hangs. And they can grow coffee there as well because it's the right climate. It's such a strange microclimate. You may as well be in South America or Central America. And that just was an incredible experience, just to be shown around by the winemaker on, while he'd been cutting the grass, and he was just like, "Oh, no worries, come in." And that's what I link to natural winemaking.
Yeah.
I couldn't imagine going to like Lafitte Rothschild and being like, "Oh, let me wash my hands. I'll let you in through the back door. Watch my dogs."
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
Yeah, it's a really wonderful article. And you can convey that spirit very well in the article. And another article that I read with interest, sticking to the topic of wine and Italian wine, was about your recent trip to South Tyrol. So what did you find there? I know that was more of a kind of, it wasn't just wine you were enjoying there. You were enjoying, I think, the whole kind of lifestyle, really, I feel like, of that region.
Yeah.
And what other Italian regions or styles are interesting you at the moment?
The South Tyrol trip was really eye-opening to me because I mentioned before that I really like Germany. I also really like Austria, and I didn't expect parts of Italy to be that type of beautiful.
To be German.
When I've been to Italy, it's been very hot and very different to this. I loved it. It was really a bit of me with South Tyrol. And the wine, I had a Lagrein for the first time, and it was just so delicious. And it really did remind me of the place. And I used to think when I started learning about wine that people talking about a sense of place and terroir, it was all a bit of bluff and bluster. How could it possibly work that way? And the more I've got into it, the more I've become a proponent of that, to the point where I argue with people that minerality is a thing, because people will say it isn't. But I've been known to taste a rock. I know what it tastes like. And when I had this lovely Lagrein, I had a lot of different wines at this winery. You'll see it in the article if you take a look. But we went into the cellar, they gave us loads of their wines to taste, and it was just so different from anything I'd tasted before. And that's what really grabbed me. I'm not that interested in going somewhere and them showing me how nice their Chardonnay is and how it's as good as a French or whatever. Like, I want it to be something new and exciting for me to drink. And that is exactly what it was. They also had Gewürztraminer on the skins. Oh, delicious. So good.
Yeah, it's a really relatively I'd say unknown, but Italians tend to either be beach people or mountain people, and so in the summer they'll either take 2 weeks at the beach or 2 weeks in the mountains. And especially here from Verona, people tend to decamp in the summer when it gets too hot in the summer in the city. So it's really is an idyllic place for a holiday, just because, as you mentioned, the temperatures are. It's still beautiful, but the temperature is like pleasant rather than scorching. And then
this was in October, and I was staying in the mountains near Bolzano, and Bolzano itself apparently gets incredibly hot during the summer months because it's in this basin. So the heat just sinks down into this basin somehow and gets stuck there. If there's no wind, it just stays. And so people do go up into the mountains to enjoy a bit of sort of cooler air. And it's funny because when you go into Bolzano, it's got, marble arcades and piazzas, and it's very Italian. And then you go up into the mountain and it is like people are South Tyrolean. And they'll call themselves Tyrolean. They're not either. They're not Italian. They're not Austrian. They are this other, and it's very sort of like the beautiful cows with their bells on, and hiking in the mountains, ski lifts, beautiful, beautiful mountains.
Yeah. It's idyllic. My wife, unfortunately, loves the beach, so we tend to go for a week on the beach. But particularly during COVID, we found ourselves up in the mountains a bit more, and just absolutely beautiful.
Yeah, I loved it.
Heading south to more central Italy, you also wrote an article about Le Marche and Verdicchio wine. And there's a line from that article that struck me, which was, I feel as though the bitterness of Verdicchio was made for wine drinkers who also love beer. And I think that's me. I'm a beer drinker who occasionally likes to drink wine, I suppose. A bottle of that wine drank that evening instead of my usual can of Peroni. So thank you for that inspiration.
Oh, you're very welcome. That's absolutely amazing. That's all I want to do, is make people thirsty for the drinks that I'm writing about. That's like the biggest compliment you could give me.
And I find myself writing about and reading about wine and beer all day, mainly wine, all day long. And so I'm constantly kind of drooling at some of these places and suggestions and recommendations.
Yeah, I know that feeling. How did you like the Verdicchio? Did you
think
of it in a more hoppy kind of way?
I did, but the next day I was back on my cans of beer. So I got what you were saying as well. It does have a lovely crispness and a bitterness. And it's only recently really that I've started to think about what it is about beer that I really like, and it is that crisp, bitter freshness. And so if there's a wine that can convey that same pleasure, then I'm all for it. And Verdicchio is a good example of that.
Yeah.
Just to come back then to this kind of concept of pub culture, it's something that I'm going to address in this conversation with you. And also next month, I'm going to be speaking to Andy Nather, who is also a fantastic wine writer who also crosses that boundary, if you like, into the world of beer and pub culture as well. But it's something that, an issue, a kind of question really that, particularly over kind of Christmas and New Year, got me thinking really about what pub culture means, what beer culture means. And we've been talking about viticulture, obviously, for centuries.
Yeah.
But recognition of a culture around pubs and beer seems like a relatively recent phenomenon. So is it valid to talk about a culture surrounding our pubs and beer, or are we just over-intellectualizing a bad habit?
I think the only reason that pub culture seems new as a concept is because we didn't used to talk about it because we were all doing it.
Too busy drinking. Yeah.
We didn't need to discuss it. It was something we did all the time. It was part of our lives. And I think part of the reason that we talk about it a lot is because we miss it.
Yeah, that's a very good point. It's a nostalgia almost.
Oh, absolutely. And there's types of nostalgia as well where that didn't really exist, but you still miss it. And there is, and I can be, just as susceptible to that as the next person. I think about idyllic pubs in films and TV, and I think, God, I wish I was around in those days to appreciate a pub in that way. But they were probably just the same as now, maybe a little bit more busy, a little bit more violent, depending on what TV show you're watching. But I think that we want to talk about pub culture because we also miss community itself.
Yeah.
I think pubs are like the most obvious place where people of all backgrounds come together in one space and easily talk to each other. Just small talk. It doesn't have to be full conversations with a complete stranger, but people are nice to each other. They say excuse me at the bar. They, you say hello to someone you've not seen in a while. Your neighbour's sat on the next table and you give them a little nod. It's these remnants of community that we just don't really get anywhere else in society today, I think.
Yeah, no, I'm getting goosepimples just listening to you there, Katie, because I hadn't really thought of it like that, but I think that's absolutely right, that nostalgia for a sense of community, whether it existed in reality or not, and especially now in this kind kind of post-COVID society that we live in, with
Definitely.
tendency to spend too much time on our telephones and at work or on the internet, that pubs do represent this kind of utopian place, community where you...
It's third space, isn't it? Yeah.
A shared space, yeah. But a real space, not like
Yep.
not like social media, which is just a...
Exactly.
That's very interesting. And
I think...
why then, sorry, are some cultures more predisposed to pub cultures than others? I'm thinking obviously between the British and Irish, for example, who have a very deeply rooted pub culture, and the Italians who, of course, they have plenty of bars and cafes, but pub culture doesn't really exist to the same extent. Pubs, to the extent that they do exist in Verona, tend to open at about 8 o'clock in the evening and are more for a kind of aperitivo crowd.
I don't know much about the Italian pub culture, I have to say.
It doesn't exist, actually, I would say.
Yeah, okay. And I feel, as an outsider, potentially that's because people already talk to each other and gather in other spaces. But I don't know that for sure.
The piazza, obviously, is the historic meeting place of coming together for the Italian community, and of course perhaps the climate has something to do with it. Italians come together in the
outdoors,
in the piazza,
yeah, or around the dinner table,
also, yeah.
I think you mentioned over intellectualizing the pub culture, and I do think that does happen. I'm a working class person. I like to talk about working class issues. And sometimes I see people talking about pubs in this very idealized way that makes me roll my eyes. And that does irritate me slightly. It's like, look at all these normal, good people, hardworking people, enjoying themselves, winding down. And it's like being part of some sort of like Planet Earth documentary in a way. But there is truth in that. Even so, in that it is one of the only places left, in my opinion, where we can truly relax in company, because everything else has kind of been gone or been taken away. People don't really socialise the same way. So sometimes someone will say, it doesn't have to be around alcohol, you could go to your local library, to which I'd say I'd love that. I'd love people to use the local library. I'm a big proponent of that. But you can't have a conversation in a library. You have to be quiet in a library. That's the whole point of a library. Unless we have... And cafes, they don't really feel very convivial to me, because quite a lot of the time you're going there and leaving with your takeout, or you're sat with your laptop. I don't really see people conversing very much.
I know also alcohol, of course, plays a crucial function in that socialising, that lowering of barriers, that loosening of tongues. And
absolutely.
Also in a moderate way, you know. I spoke last month to Professor Edward Slingerland, and he was emphasising the importance of alcohol as a stimulant or a relaxant in these social contexts. One final question just around pub culture, and that is, I would say women of a certain generation, so my mum, for example, tend to think of pubs as alienating or male-dominated spaces, and they wouldn't dream of going to a pub alone. Maybe also for my mum, that's perhaps changed in recent years, but I suspect she'd still feel slightly uncomfortable about going to a pub by herself. Is that changing at all? And finally, just to add on to that, the back of that, where does wine fit into the pub culture scene?
I think definitely things have changed. In my experience, I've never been looked down on openly for being a woman in a pub, and I go to the pub on my own as well, and that's never been mentioned. Potentially, you know, a group of men will find a different reason to like pick on me, but it'll be like, "What are you writing?" or "Why are you here with a laptop?" I don't do that normally, but if the pub's empty, I'll try and get a bit of work done, because I'd rather do that there than in a cafe. But yeah, like they'll find other reasons, but I don't feel uncomfortable because it's my space as well. But I understand that not everyone is as sort of bullshit as me. So I can imagine you would feel a little bit uncomfortable walking into, especially a pub you'd never been into before, as a lone woman. But I think that goes with the uncertainty of knowing who's in there. And that would be for any minority, I think, because sometimes a pub can be seen as a place of congregation, of, you don't know, like, I have an Asian beer writer friend called David, and he talks quite openly about feeling unwelcome when he walks into a pub, but he knows what it's going to be like when he looks at the flags on the outside, which is a shame because, as I was saying before, there are places of community. They're the one space we've got left. And it's down to the individuals inside, really, rather than the pub itself, isn't it?
Yeah.
When I ran a bar, I made an absolute rule: no dickheads. And I ruled that bar with an iron fist. And I feel like to have a pub where everyone feels welcome, it's not just about putting a poster up that says no dickheads. It's not about like making it look very nice so that everyone they don't act that way without being told. Sometimes you have to do some kind of work to make sure that everyone's welcome. Yeah. And if pubs can do that, and there are a lot of pubs that are doing that, then absolutely everyone will be welcome and women will continue to feel safer in pubs. Yeah. But I definitely, I'm 38, as I say, I've never really had an issue. But I know that, I've taken my grandma to a pub and she's been like, ooh, this is new. I know what you mean,
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's still a work in progress, I think, probably.
It is a work in progress. There's a cultural idea, especially with older people, that like women don't go to pubs. But I see loads of women at the pub, older women too. But maybe it's because I'm northern, I don't know.
So no, it is striking. I mean, I speak from a privileged position as a white man, and I would feel comfortable probably walking into any pub in the UK. But I recognise that that's probably not the case for everyone. So yeah, there maybe is still some work to do there. But yeah, it's very interesting. And I mean, when I go back to Glasgow or London, you do now see women sharing a bottle of wine in the afternoon in the pub, which is something that would probably be unthinkable in Italy, for kind of whether it be middle-aged women who just spending an afternoon sharing a bottle of wine and having a chat, But something about that culture, Italian culture, that wouldn't really consider that as a valid way to spend an afternoon. What about wine then, and Italian wine in pubs? Is there? I mean, we probably think of Pinot Grigio and Prosecco being the main.
Yeah.
Is there any diversity to that? Are people going up to the bars in the UK and ordering, or pubs and ordering glasses of wine, or is that still a kind of?
It's happening more and more. I certainly am more likely to buy wine from the pub now than I used to be, just because the quality has gotten a lot better. It used to be sort of a bit of an apology of a list at the back of the bar. It was like, we've got white or we've got red. That's it. And you don't know what it is even. Whereas now I can get a fairly decent, like you say, a fairly decent Pinot Grigio from my local pub. And given that about 5 years ago, they just had those, the little like single serve bottles with the screw top.
Yeah.
And now they've got like a fairly nice selection. It just shows that even the most traditional pubs, this is a different pub to the one I work in. This is even more traditional, sort of like high-vis jackets in the daytime, like after work, and then like a folk kind of get together in the evening with like fiddles and stuff, like, proper. They have a decent wine list. So I think things are changing, and for the better, because having more options is just going to bring more people, and that's what you want.
Absolutely. Is there anything that the wine industry in general can learn from the beer industry? I'm particularly thinking, you mentioned no alcohol beers. That's something that the wine industry is currently grappling with. Obviously, the complexities around de-alcoholized wines are slightly more complex. But is there anything that the wine industry should or could learn from the beer industry around Generation Z, around marketing, around NOLO?
Part of the problem is that non-alcoholic wine is not very nice.
Yes, okay.
For me, my personal opinion, I don't think I've ever had one that I've gone, I would rather drink this over a normal wine. And the thing that the beer industry has managed to do is create no alcoholic beers that actually taste good, that you would choose because they taste nice and because they don't have alcohol in, is like a real bonus. So people have started. So there's a brewery in the Lake District called Bowness Bay, and their pale ale, Swan Pale, they also have a Swan Zero, and people do half and half so that they've got a really low alcohol beer.
Wow.
And I think that kind of thing is happening more and more, but it's because they're indistinguishable from each other, and they've concentrated on the flavour. The same with Guinness Zero, the same with a lot of different zero alcohol beers. They taste good, and that's why people buy them. Whereas in the wine world, what I've seen is really pretty marketing, lovely labels, a lot of, quite frankly, bump about how we all have lovely lifestyles to hold down lots of jobs, and we're all active and blah blah blah, and we need to drink less. I don't care about any of that. I just want it to taste nice. And I think focusing on new technology to do that is probably where we're going to have to go. Or maybe look at different things that aren't wine. So I know in the beer world there's something called hop water that is delicious. Have you ever had some?
No.
So it's sparkling water infused with hops.
Right.
And so you can tell, because like if you're a real beer nerd, then you can tell the difference between the flavours of hops. And so you've got like citra hops, really lovely, fresh, crisp citrus flavours. Or you've got, your more tropical hops. And they infuse this water with that flavour. It's obviously zero alcohol because it's literally just sparkling water. What about piquettes making a big splash in the market? Because that's something that's low alcohol naturally, because you're literally just using the must.
Yeah.
And reconstituting it. I've had piquettes that were absolutely delicious. They're not obviously as full flavoured because they've not got, the tannins left and things like that, but they're still a lovely drink in their own right. And I just think looking at different options that actually taste nice will do us much more favours than trying to remarket an undesirable product.
Sure. And again, it remains a divisive topic, the question of no low wines, whereas I think beers, as you mentioned, are much more well along the line there. I'm intrigued by that concept of doing a half and half, a no alcohol beer with a normal beer and mixing the two together. I haven't heard that before, but next time I'm over, I'll give that a bash as well.
It's fascinating, isn't it?
Does that have a name? What would you call that? What would you ask for? Just a half and a half, or?
I don't know.
We used to ask for a shandy or a tops.
I think they call it a half and half there.
It's a really interesting conversation, and I just fascinated by beer culture, pub culture, and also the interrelationship between wine writing and beer writing. Tell us what you're reading for pleasure at the moment, Katie. That's something I ask all of my guests, just to get an idea of what you like to dabble in outside the world of beer and wine, if you do.
I've set myself the challenge this year of reading The Count of Monte Cristo. I decided, it's been sat on my shelf, and obviously it's massive, but I do love a classic. And what I like about classic fiction is that it's like a soap opera once you get into it. But people would be put off reading Tess of the D'Urbervilles or something like that. But I do find, because they were written as serialised books in the past, they've got cliffhangers, they've got nefarious characters, they've got people making terrible decisions that you can see a mile off. And I just think that already it's got loads of that, so I'm really happy to be ploughing through it.
It's a good call, going back to these classics that are gathering dust on the bookshelves. I can't remember who, but one of my guests quite recently mentioned Tess of the D'Urbervilles as well. So yeah, there definitely is an appetite for these old classics. I'm immersing myself in beer as you might imagine. There's a book called The Meaning of Beer: An Alternative History of the World by Johnny Garrett.
Yeah, I know Johnny Garrett. He's a really great writer. Yeah.
Yeah, it's really good. This was a gift in the office, Secret Santa. So thanks, Manuela. It was the perfect gift because it brings together two of my great loves in life, which are beer and history.
Fantastic. They know you well.
It's epic. It covers a lot of ground, the history of beer drinking and the origins of beers in all different parts of the world. So highly recommended.
Perfect.
Where can our listeners follow you and your writing and Pellicle? Where can they get hold of Pellicle?
Well, first and foremost, Pellicle is found at pelliclemag.com. We are completely funded by our readers and subscribers on Patreon.
Okay.
Our Patreon is also Pellicle Mag, and you can find all the links on our website. And there is a weekly newsletter that goes out that I write, and it features because we publish once a week on a Wednesday, and that will go out in a newsletter on a Wednesday morning, and you can sign up to that on our website too. And we're also on Instagram, Pellicle Mag, and we are also on Blue Sky as Pellicle Mag as well.
Excellent. And as I said at the outset, highly recommended. Some really fantastic beer writing, but also wine writing as well. So if you're interested in beer, wine, some fantastic storytelling, then I would urge you to check that out.
Yeah, we have some fantastic writers as well. Sometimes I'm just overwhelmed with the quality of the writing that we get in. So yeah, and also I need to point out as well, while we are funded by readers, everything is free to read. So you don't have to sign up to anything to read our stories.
Yeah, wholeheartedly agree. Some of the writing is top class. Katie, thank you very much for being my guest today on Book Club, and to our listeners,
you're very welcome.
Thank you for your company today. Until next time, ciao, Katie.
Ciao.
Thanks for joining us on Book Club with the Italian Wine Podcast. Tune in again next month when we'll get between the vines with another great wine book. Remember, our show notes, including full details of all the books we've discussed today, are available at italianwinepodcast.com or wherever you get them.